Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for taking the trouble to come out and listen to me this evening. I will tell you just a little bit about myself before I start, and I will start with an apology for the scientists here, because there may be trouble translating my English into your languages. There's more than one country here. I'm not going to talk science this evening. I'm going to keep everything very, very simple. I trained in the 1960s with microwave warfare with the military. I am very well acquainted with the effects of microwaves, which is, of course, what all of the transmitters, Wi-Fi, iPods, iPads, what they all use, microwaves. I trained with the military because at that time, microwaves during the Cold War were used as stealth weapons, as they still are today. And because of their use of stealth weapons, which I understood, that alerted me when this industry started to come out with cell phones and especially Wi-Fi for children, because I'm fully aware of the damage that it can cause to young girls and ladies. When I left the military, a small part of my employment for the government was to question captured spies during the Cold War, particularly spies which had specialist information on microwave warfare. I didn't solely talk to spies. I talked to terrorist groups, international criminals, and surprisingly, I was thinking about this coming over on the aeroplane. My main job was to actually interrogate and find out about corruption at high level in the English police and at high level in the English government. And if you look at any of the English papers today, the two organizations being questioned are the police and the government. Nothing has changed over 45 years. Following that, when I left, I went to teach advanced physics, which I did up to a few years ago. I obviously teach mathematics. I have also a teaching diploma in human physiology, and I also teach chemistry. I have 2 university degrees, a diploma. I was commissioned 11 years ago by a police union to write the safety report in the Tetra airwave communication system. 3 years ago, a different police union asked me to write an update to that report, both of which I condemned the system as particularly dangerous. I am a scientific advisor to a few organizations, both international and UK-based. And finally, I work for free. I've never charged a penny for anything I do, for 2 reasons. One, I can represent the poor, and they don't have to worry about me. And secondly, nobody can tell me what to do, and nobody can tell me what to say, or more importantly, what not to say. With me, it is the truth, and in some countries, the truth comes as quite a surprise. Now, I'm going to begin with, first of all, I'm talking about microwaves. Microwaves react with water, which is how microwave ovens work. And is there proof? Am I just going to stand here talking about endless science and meaningless things? Is there proof? Which is what everybody wants to know. And it is a very simple answer. The answer is yes. In fact, there is quite a lot of it. In fact, there is an enormous amount of it. And the proof really came out with a document I have here. And this particular document was the most top secret document at its time. Realizing that microwaves caused a lot of damage to water-based bodies, the United States Defense Intelligence Agency published this document, which was circulated to all governments, all Western governments. And I think this piece of paper, this one piece of paper here with the one sentence, is going to cause more death, more suffering, and more pain than the entire Second World War. Just this one piece of paper. And it says to all of the governments, if the advanced nations of the West are strict in the enforcement of stringent exposure standards, there could be unfavorable. And really, the whole argument begins and ends here. That is all the proof you need. And what the governments did, and it is still in force today, they said, well, what we will look at for our safety standard, we will not take the level at which microwaves interact with the cellular processes in the body. And for an adult, there are around 4,500 different biological processes that can be affected. It's 4,050 in a child. They said, we won't look at that level. We will choose a level up here that gives us total freedom. And it is the one used today for all of the cell phones, even the Tetra airwave system. And it is 6 minutes of warming. That's it. The total safety level is 6 minutes of heating. In other words, if you don't feel too warm in 6 minutes, then it's okay. And that's it. And this is why we have all of this trouble. And it is why country after country are now finding they have leukemia clusters, cancer clusters, all sorts of problems going on that I will discuss over this and the following lecture after the break. But it's this one piece of paper that triggered everything off. The program, after this was put out, it is called, by governments, it is called active denial. In other words, they deny everything. Now, leading up to this, and this takes some believing, to reach this stage, there were lots of experiments on lots of people without their knowledge. In just 40 years, and this is documented, in 40 years, 500,000 people were tested without their knowledge, many to the point of death. They chose military personnel because military personnel are fit, they're active, and they make good case studies. They chose students, psychiatric patients, the poor, children over the age of 4, pregnant women, Muslims, and Catholics. I won't go into why those groups were chosen at this point, but they were on the list, and of course anybody else that they decided to experiment on. In 1986, at a top-secret conference, a US weapons center, a gentleman made a speech, and he said, concerning the microwaves, he said, "We can change the behavior of cells, tissue, whole organisms, have a 6 times higher fetus mortality, cause birth defects, and induce cancer in human cells." That is the result of their research. Again, in a top-secret course between 2001 and 2007, course number 11, students, these would be scientists, will be familiar with current knowledge. That is, cancer, memory, brain function, damage to the eye, skin, and birth defects can be caused by this radiation. And that is borne out in this document, the one I said is most dangerous, because apart from the top line here, all of the rest of this are illnesses which you can expect to get if you are exposed to radiation. And it says here, exposed to microwave radiation below thermal effects. In other words, below the safety level. And then they list all of the psychiatric problems and all of the physical problems. Some of them they describe as severe neuropathological symptoms. So that is why we are in this mess. A few more bits of paper here. This is a top secret document, or it was till I got hold of it. Biological effects on health hazards, microwave irradiation. And again, they say here, they specifically say here, this is, I'm getting into trouble here, aren't I? They specifically say here, this is radio frequency microwave irradiation. And they have, this particular document was 350 pages. Similarly, the Naval Medical Research Institute, a very highly regarded research laboratory service, again United States, they talk about altered menstrual activity for ladies and a lot of fetal development problems. And they say here it is attributed to microwave and radio frequency radiation. There were several top secret studies. I mean, I've made a list here, just flying out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And some of them used hundreds and thousands of people. And this one here is the National Security Advisors. And with one of them, they were taken to court. The government were taken to court. And this was MK Ultra, the top secret. Usually, the microwave ones begin with the letters MK. And it says, although the shocking details of medical ethics abuses by the US and Canadian governments were amply detailed, Washington and Canada, citing national security and government privilege, stalled for so long that cases never came to trial. The surviving victims settled for a pittance out of court. In fact, it took 50 years to get that to court, and 50 years is about the standard time that governments try to stall you for. An experiment I know of that was carried out in England, the survivors only reached court a few years ago, that was 50 years on, and only last week on our news, thalidomide, which again was an experiment for pregnant ladies, only last week the government scientists and the industry apologized, 50 years on. The question that people come up with is there any legal proof? We have scientific proof, and that can't be argued against. I will face any scientist and say, if you think this is safe, explain this. And I was involved in this. And I will say in my defense that whilst I was questioning spies and other people, I never once used a single second of pain, embarrassment, humiliation, hypnotism, drugs, nothing at all. I spoke to the ladies and gentlemen exactly as I would talk to you if we were sitting outside having coffee. The proof, well, to my knowledge, there are 8,300 incriminating documents from the military explaining how microwaves cause illness. There are 5 high court cases, to my knowledge, in various countries, proving that the cell towers and the cell phones cause cancer, neurological damage and physical damage. 5 high court cases that have been made against the industry. There are 14 epidemiological studies. In other words, a study on thousands of people over 10 years each. There are 14 of them, to my knowledge. And there are 23 now legal judgments which are not high court, where a magistrate or a mayor or somebody has intervened and ordered a transmitter to be turned off or taken down or moved. So there is plenty of legal proof. And I have some of the court numbers and some of the court details with me. The Council of Europe, Parliament, Parliamentary Assembly, Council of Europe. On page 3, because of all of the knowledge which has been gained and denied by the industry and some governments, Section 8.32 is very specific. Ban all mobile phones, DECT phones, Wi-Fi systems from classrooms and schools. It couldn't be more clear. And further on page 6, they discuss the danger to the plants, insects, and animals, which I will be discussing after the break, and they specifically target here the tetra airwave frequency. You will find that insurance companies are now not covering illnesses from transmitters or cell phones or Wi-Fi. Now, many people, when they buy all of these gadgets for their children, they don't actually look at the small print at the back. I do. And for instance, the Apple, the iPhone, it says it should be kept at least 15 millimeters away from the body. Now, that's because it isn't safe. There is no other reason why you should keep it 15 millimeters from your body. But what happens if you're holding it? Because you're touching it. And it isn't just the microwaves leaving it coming through you. They will go into your arm, and they go into your body, and they travel through your body, and they are grounded like an electric current, because it is an electric current. And this is why, as I will come to, pregnant women are advised never to come into contact with microwaves. So they say 15 millimeters from the body. It says here in another guidebook, a few animal studies, however, have suggested that low level of microwave radiation can cause the development of cancer in laboratory animals. So if you take them to court, you don't have a leg to stand on, because they will say, look at the small print, we've said it can cause cancer, and you chose to use it. Similarly, another one here, it says, now customers, when they buy these new gadgets, you agree not to sue the cell phone manufacturer for any bodily damages or harm, or take part in any class action lawsuit. That's an industry protecting itself. Now, this is a document here which the industry do not want you to know about. In America, in New York, you have to notify a body. If you are an industry, you must notify this body so that the shareholders can read about any lawsuits facing your industry. Because if you go to court and the industry is found guilty, you lose your shares. So in New York, the industry has to notify if there are any legal claims against it. And there are pages here, double-sided, of mobile manufacturers who are facing class actions. It's tucked away in the back. It took an awful lot of finding, but it's there. And a class action is when lots of people band together, usually with one lawyer, because they're all fighting the same case. And there are pages here of class actions. An Australian gentleman, I wrote this paper because I probably receive a phone call every day at home from somebody who is being targeted by the industry because they have to carry on with their experiments, or the government. And I wrote this particular paper just to try and help them. And an Australian gentleman here, a doctor, who actually worked for the World Health Organization, saying that there was absolutely nothing wrong. He now represents the communication industry as a consultant. And he said here, he wrote here, all aspects of human behavior can be affected, even controlled. Those are his words. Now, if anyone is thinking of any form of legal action against being targeted, or there is a EU parliamentary convention here, January, what was the year? 1999, and I have the number. But it is a call to ban all human experimentation or manipulation, and the European Parliament have a number that you can use. Similarly, there is the Nuremberg Treaty, and I am trying to invoke this with the Tetra airwave system because the police do not know that they are actually a part of an epidemiological study, or the ambulance service or fire brigade, where the government themselves say we cannot rule out severe neurological damage and cancer. And it is a study which, in fact, is going on until 2018. This is the Nuremberg Treaty that was signed at the end of the war, and it specifically says, and the Western governments, we all signed it, the voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential. If you are being targeted or you are being experimented upon, they require your consent, and there are no exceptions. Similarly, with the police or the emergency services or the secret services or the military, again, if you are a part of an ongoing experiment, it requires your consent. And it doesn't mean at the meeting where I was several years ago in England, where the government doctor spoke to the police unions, and she said, use it or resign. Those were her words. Use it or resign. And if they chose to keep their jobs, as many people would, because they have families and they have commitments, then to me, and I'm sure legally, that doesn't constitute a full understanding of the risks and consent. So if all this is known, excuse me, I do need to drink. If I spilt that on that, I'd electrocute myself, wouldn't I? If all this is known, why aren't the government doing anything? If they know how dangerous it is, they know the effects, why are they not doing something about it? Well, the first answer, of course, is the most simple one, which is money, lots of it, for specific people. Not for your country, but for specific people. Secondly, every single person with a cell phone can be tracked. And it may amaze you to know what they know about you. Even if your cell phone is off, and this is Scientific American, even if your cell phone is off, totally off, it can still be tracked. Everywhere you go can be tracked. If you have one of those camera things, they can see through it. It can be activated. They can hear everything you're saying, even if it's off. And when I say this to financial people, bankers or lawyers or doctors, and I say, if you're sitting in your surgery and your cell phone is down there and it's turned off, somebody can still be listening to every single personal item of your conversation without your knowledge. And it's not just your government. I'm sorry. Can I do the questions afterwards, please? Because of I'll break my concentration. Thank you. There are lots of phones. Some can be activated and some cannot. Some can be activated by up to 40 different countries. That surprises people. And I'm not going into the electronics of why that can happen, but up to 40 different countries. Now, you may be thinking, well, okay, mine is, or my cell phone is encrypted or whatever, and all of this I have documentary evidence for. This is from Cambridge University very recently in a scientific journal. It is actually possible, they say, to reprogram the contents of supposedly secure memory and obtain information. They can actually reprogram your phone. I know how it's done, but I don't have time to go into it now. But up to 40 countries. And you might think, well, why? What's the point? You may be thinking, I'm not important. Why would somebody want to find out about me? Well, we're coming back. One reason, not every reason, but one reason could be blackmail. One reason could be that I know quite a lot about the spying world because I spent 11 years questioning some spies, which was, as I say, a very small part of my work. You may think I only sweep floors and I wash dishes and I wouldn't be important enough for a spy to want to investigate me. In fact, you are the very person that they are looking for. The very person they are looking for. Why? I don't have time to go into, but I can assure you, you are valuable. So it may be for future, they may not be doing it, but all I'm saying is there is a possibility of up to 40 countries that have access to your cell phone. And of course, everything that goes over your computer can also be monitored. That goes without saying. The governments, this is very recently published, just July, 28th of July. Not only if they wish, and in this country, nobody may be listening to anything you say. All I'm saying is there is a possibility. But there is now a detector, and it is in use, and it can detect, because of the immense computer powers that we have now, it can detect hormone levels in bodies, the molecular structure of the hormone levels in bodies, so it knows what your body is doing, and it can also look at your brain patterns, and because microwaves will go into the body, it will look at your brain pattern, and it can tell which parts of your brains are now active. And if they know which parts of your brains are active, of course, they can judge roughly what your mood is, and probably, in some cases, what you're thinking. And this machine is now working today. So not only can they know where you are, what you're doing, what you're saying, but they can look inside your body as well, and that's pretty scary. So all of this is available to the secret services and the governments if they want to investigate people. Another reason is that microwaves can be used as stealth weapons, which I'm perfectly familiar with, but they can also be used to change the environment. Many people don't know that in some storm clouds, high activity, the high electrical activity, actually produces gamma rays, radioactive rays. Now, this is pretty scary stuff. If you drop a substance, a soft, shiny metal like barium, or aluminium into the clouds will become radioactive. And the clouds are also charged. And if you beam microwaves at the clouds, it is possible to physically change the weather. And if you can change the weather only slightly, you can either cause another country economic disaster if it's too dry, or economic disaster if it is too wet. And this technology is available, which is another reason why the government will not interfere with the microwave industry. In the UK, which I consider to be, and I'm ashamed to say, probably if you were to list the 5 most corrupt countries in the world, I'm talking purely about England, not Wales, not Scotland, not Ireland, just England. I would think England will be among the 5 most top corrupt countries in the world. And this is what they have just published for the communications industry, the government. They said they can put anything anywhere. No limits. Anything, anywhere. Schools, hospitals, nurseries, anything, anywhere. And finally, finally on this bit, I wrote in 2009, I wrote an updated report. This is a most confidential report on the Tetra airwave communication system for the Public and Commercial Services Union, 2009, which I condemn. They will have about 90 days to live. 7,630. Before I wrote this, Sir William Stewart, chief government scientist, he actually found that the Tetra frequency released calcium ions from brain tissue. In other words, it can cause severe neurological disorder and cause cancer. The top, most reputable journal, Police Review, Jane's, did a 3-page article on this. So it's not me standing here just making this up, and they won't print a word unless they check it and double check it, and they did a 3-page article. And finally in this section, or nearly finally, finally in this section, I'm going to be very careful what I say here, because this is a High Court legal case, and it is still rolling on about Tetra. I was asked to send legal people scientific evidence to do with Tetra. And this is the letter I wrote to a High Court judge where, when officers are on duty, I make 2 statements when I talk like this. The first is, I will guarantee that you will not find a police station with a substantial amount of officers that have had Tetra for 18 months or more. You will find increased cancers. The police, their behavior will have deteriorated. There will be more car accidents by police in police cars. They all go up. In every single country I've been in, it is what they say. And police aggression goes up. And this is in my evidence to the judge, and if there are police officers here that would like a copy of this, I've made arrangements with the doctor organizing this talk. I can't just photocopy it for everybody. The problems are you have police officers enclosed in metal police vans, usually for some time, while they're transmitting. They are close to other officers transmitting. They tend to wear metal-based helmets in riot situations, which of course reflects the microwaves. And they tend to use the system for more than 6 minutes. And all of this is provable. It's not a theory, it is provable. And if any police officer wants proof that the system is dangerous to go to court, I can do it inside an hour. I can tell you what to do inside an hour. It is provable. With one of our government experiments, they wrote at the back, in every group, these are police, some participants were significantly affected. They didn't say what some was, but if we take some as a certain number and you multiply that over 100,000 officers, it's going to be considerable. Okay. I'm going to cover one more section and then we'll stop for break. We're okay on time here. I had a phone call from a lady a few years ago, and she spoke for about an hour and a quarter. I just answered the phone. She said, "Mr. Trower, yes," and she spoke for an hour and a quarter. You're going to have to forgive me. I have a little bit of trouble talking about this. I'll get through it. This is her phone number. This is her phone number. She said, "My daughter has just had her 12th birthday. I am holding her hand. She is dead. She was number 12 to die since the transmitter went up in the playground. And she spoke for 2.25 hours. There was nothing I could do or say." Now, you may think that one person phoning up doesn't mean that the industry is to blame. And that is true enough. But when we looked into this, it was one school with another 200 that had cancer clusters with transmitters in the playgrounds. 200. Now, why children are specifically at risk, and I'm going to deal, please forgive me for that, I'm going to deal at length with Wi-Fi. This is my main concern. There are 5 reasons why children are most at risk. First of all, I'll just have a drink if you forgive me. I'm doing well today. Sometimes I can't get through that bit. There is no known safety level of microwave irradiation anywhere in the world published for a child. And whenever I go to a country, I make a challenge, and I'm making it here. I will face any government scientist, any industry scientist, live on television, and I will say to them, what is the safe level of microwave irradiation for a child? And when I speak in schools and to governments and royalty and other people I talk to, I say, what is the safe level? Because if you can't tell me, why are you putting Wi-Fi in schools? A single day of a child in front of Wi-Fi in a school is a day too long. And I will come to why in a second. Now, with children, there is no known safe level anywhere published in the world. Would you give a drug to a child if there was no known safe level? Would you guess? No, of course you wouldn't. In children, the blood-brain barrier, which is a barrier around the brain, is also around the thorax, the chest, and it also covers a part of the gut. It's like a fishing net. And in children, it takes 18 months to develop from birth. It is published and it is known that microwaves destroy the blood-brain barrier. Now, what that means is that as the child is in the womb and as the child is growing up, toxins from inside the body can go into the brain and cause damage. And essential chemicals inside the brain can come out and deprive the brain of what it needs. Now, Dr. Christine Ackermann, I think she's German, she will forgive me if she isn't, and another doctor have written on this extensively, and they have both said this can lead to autism and other neurological illnesses in children. The nervous system inside a child, the electrical cables, if you like, they have 122 layers to protect them from neurological damage. And they take 22 years to complete. A child doesn't have the full system until the child is 22 years old. They are laid down by a system known as protein synthesis. And protein synthesis is destroyed by microwave irradiation. You are risking neural degenerative damage with your children with Wi-Fi in a classroom. And I can assure you, as true as I stand here, the levels of radiation in a classroom exceed those that are used in the Cold War to make people sick. And if you add up the radiation a child is exposed to in a class of 20 or 30 transmitters, with one on the wall, with one in the playground, taking all of the calls from all the other classrooms and spreading around the school, when you add that up, it's pretty frightening. The immune system of a child takes 18 years to complete. And at the beginning, that document from the American government, everything it comes up with is suppression of the immune system. So you are destroying a child's immune system, again, before it's up and running. And of course, I have documentary evidence for all this. And finally, the bones. The bones in a child are not fully developed until the child is 28. Now, if a child goes to school at 5 and stays there at university until 24, and they use Wi-Fi, that's a lot of bone damage. And there are papers to show that both the marrow in the bones, which is of course moist, which makes the immune system, and the bone density, they can be affected. But it takes 28 years. And if anybody's wondering what the last bone is to form, it's the clavicle. The clavicle here. And this is the paper here. I carry all of my evidence with me. Here it is, protein synthesis by the University of Dundee, Scottish University, very clever people. Protein synthesis. Now, the reason there is no safe level for a child is that, and this appeared in a scientific journal, August 2012, they have just suddenly realized what we have been saying all along. Children are not small adults. You don't look at an adult dose and scale it down for a child. That is wrong. They are immensely complex beings, immensely complex. And you cannot scale. This is to do for the drugs industry. This is a warning for the drugs industry that where they're putting adult dose, child dose, the child dose is wrong. It is a guess. But for microwave, there is no child safe level anyway. And children absorb, as it happens, more radiation than adults because they're smaller. And the smaller you are, the more you are to the size of the aerial, and the more you will resonate with the microwaves. If there is any doubt, there are 17 pages here of university-published papers explaining how fertility and reproductive organs in ladies are damaged by microwaves. 17 pages of just university experiments. So there can be no doubt. And I can never believe for the life of me why people put Wi-Fi in schools. I can never understand it. Well, I can understand it. Usually they give them some sort of gift like a free phone or a free iPad or iPod. Because it's cheaper to do that than it is use fiber optic cable and telephone cables. It's cheaper. So they do that. This is, I've been through this. Again, the small print in the mobile phone book at the back. I've read a few of them, but it particularly warns here, I'm not sure how you measure this, but it says 9.8 inches, keep it 9.8 inches from your body, especially pregnant women and the lower abdomen of teenagers. How you would measure that, I don't know. I summed up quite a few hundred research papers, and I'm going to leave the doctor with a copy of this if anybody wants it. If you do, I suggest you photocopy it in color because it highlights different areas. I summed up all of the problem with children and Wi-Fi in schools. And I broke it into what I call a cartoon. And in fact, it's actually having quite an impact around the world. It is on the internet, but I will leave a copy here. But basically, I'll just have a little sip. Basically, if you can follow my train of thought here, please, ladies, I'd like you to imagine you are 15 years old and you are in school, or you are a teacher in school, a lady teacher in school, a young lady teacher. You have around 400,000 eggs or follicles in your ovaries which can develop into eggs, around 400,000. Now, they are being irradiated from your Wi-Fi. And what a lot of scientists fail to read is that this particular DNA inside the follicles or the eggs suffers 10 times more damage from radiation than any other DNA in the body. So even if the children had a safety level, it would be a factor of 10 out anyway. They suffer 10 times more. And this particular DNA, the mitochondrial DNA, is irreparable. If a child goes into school tomorrow and that particular part of the DNA is damaged, then what I'm going to say now is quite shocking. You are a schoolgirl or a teacher. Your DNA is being irradiated with microwaves, and that is published. So you could have damaged DNA. If you have a child, that child can be born or could be born with a genetic abnormality. But because it is irreparable, that child's child will also carry that same genetic disorder. And her child will carry the same disorder, and so on, until there are no more females in that line. The schoolgirl today, or the teacher today, is not harming herself, she is harming her generations. And that is published. But it gets worse. And this is why I fight to try and get this stopped in countries. And in some I am successful. It gets worse. And if you want me to talk to your schools, I'll come back. I work for free, I'll come back. Imagine now you are... Thank you. Imagine you are the schoolgirl who is now 18, and I've taught 18-year-olds advanced physics, or you are the teacher, and imagine you are pregnant. And if you only get to ask one question of a scientist, this is the one to ask. You are now 18, or the teacher, and you are pregnant. And you are within the first 100 days of your pregnancy. You may not at the beginning even know that you are pregnant. But in the first 100 days, the ovarian follicles in your baby, the ovarian follicles are forming. It is 100 days, then 120, I think, then another 100 and something. But the first 100 days, they are forming. The 400,000 follicles are forming. They have absolutely no protection against microwaves. None. Not a single bit. The areas in the cells, for the scientists, the protein 53, the nuclear core complex that fights against radiation, they are non-existent. And my question for any scientist is, what is the safe level of microwave irradiation for the first 100 days of an embryo? And if you can tell me, I will be very, very happy, because I can retire and go home and look after my wife and walk my dog. But there isn't one. So, in fact, the schoolgirl today, whose ovaries are already being irradiated, she has a risk. But when she becomes pregnant, there is her risk on the child already, plus the risk of the ovarian follicles having further damage. So the main damage is going to come out in the grandchild. And that is already established, because there are mammalian species that do not take 18, 20 years to have children. And that is already known. So my message today is, please rethink your Wi-Fi. Because we can avoid all of this. We can avoid the whole lot There is a simple solution to this and most other problems. All you want is a piece of wire about that long. That's it. A piece of wire about that long. Either fiber optic cable or telephone cable, doesn't matter. They both work. Piece of wire that long, and you save the risk to the generations. Now, if you're going to ask me how many children, I can't give you a maximum because there are lots of other factors. I can give you a minimum, but it is quite frightening. The mobile industry themselves have covered their backs. This is a document published by the Mobile Manufacturers Forum, the industry. And they have listed problems from scientific research to do with, and I'll stick on the topic, embryos, testes in boys, fetus in girls, sperm in boys. They have listed problems in Belgium, China, Egypt, France, Italy, Malaysia, Nigeria, Pakistan, Poland, Slovak Republic, Switzerland, Turkey, Ukraine, Venezuela. So it's pretty well widespread. Now, even if you're sitting there thinking this bloke's totally mad, he should be locked up, and he's making all this up. Okay, I'll go along with that. There is one organization that isn't mad, and I have the utmost respect for the people who represent it, again free of charge, and the work they do, and it is UNICEF, the children's charity UNICEF. They decided, because they protect children all over the world, they decided to investigate, and they wrote a paper, Electromagnetic Fields from Phones, Health Effects on Children and Teenagers. They looked into it themselves, and they published their paper. And they found an 85% increase in central nervous system disorders, which is what I said about the electrical pathways. A 36% in epilepsy, which for the scientists, if you want to know how it causes epilepsy, I can tell you the part of the brain. A word I don't particularly like here, I would prefer to say a psychiatric disorder, but they've actually described it as mental retardation, an increase of 11%. Blood and immune disorders, which will obviously come from the bone marrow, 82% with a risk to the fetus. And they published it. And I think, you can't argue with that. Now, just a few bits of paper more here. We're doing okay for time. Published in our Sunday papers, do not expose yourself to microwaves if you are pregnant. The reason is, as I said, the microwaves go into your body and they go through. I'm not going to describe the path they go through. It's too complex. But they go through your body. They carry a small electric current. Now, I want to just talk about the fetus for 2 seconds, just to give you an idea. If you think of the brain of a fetus inside the uterus of a pregnant lady, I'm just going to talk about the electrical connections there for 2 seconds to give you an idea of where I'm coming from. Imagine that you go home tonight and you pick up your telephone book and you dial every single person in that book by pushing a button all at once. Now imagine you have a telephone book for every single person in the world, in every country. And you push a button and you can dial every single person in the world in one go. That is the number of connections being made a second in the brain of a child in a uterus. Every second. And they are minuscule electrical charges that are involved in all the intricate work. Minuscule. And if you're going to put through a massive, great electric current, it's not going to do the baby any good. And there are papers published that say it can interfere with the development of the brain later on in life. Okay, I've covered that, and I've covered that, and I've covered that. I said that earlier, around 200 schools internationally, a study was covered, a study was done in 2003 and 2005, and they found around 200 schools with leukemia or cancer clusters where they had transmitters in the playground. They found miscarriages, mostly from lady teachers. In fact, the miscarry rates, I know this from the Cold War because pregnant women were deliberately exposed to microwaves, and they found a 57.7% of the women had miscarriages. And that was written up by the World Health Organization. Miscarriages, brain cancers, other cancers, breast cancers. This particular one here, and just one of the citations here, it said, telecom giant Orange has suspended operation at a school phone mast site in Paris after 8 cases of cancer were confirmed among children in the district. That's just one of the, in this particular one, 138. And there are around 60 here. And it's not just confined to European countries. And here, in the UK, they found a cancer cluster. This was brought up in Parliament, the English Parliament. A cancer cluster of children around a tetramast. And here, this is the MP speaking. They found 11 children under 11 with leukemia and 7 adults with cancer around a transmitter. The minister stood up and said, we are within international guidelines. In other words, the thermal level, and sat down. And that was it. Case closed. It took about 2 years to get that into Parliament. And the minister just blew it away with one breath. And if you think, that was 2003, 2005, if you think they've stopped, this is 2012. Cancer cluster around school mast. This is Kansas. They're still going on. In fact, they're becoming commonplace, and people have stopped actually just publishing them, which is just amazing for me. This is a study carried out by the industry on its own microwaves. And they have said it can cause neurological damage in children. Carried out by the industry itself on its own product. Okay. Now, one of the saddest areas of this, I gave a talk in Wales Several years ago, I was asked to go and talk to the council. Am I still sounding all right there? I was asked. Well, my earrings are falling off. There we are. I was asked to go and give a talk to the council on putting up transmitters in Wales. And I drove into Wales and I looked at all the mountains. And I said to the council, and I hate being right, I said to the council, whatever you do not put up transmitters in this area. There are too many hills. The microwaves will reflect and it will have a devastating effect on the children. And one of the most common effects on children is depression and suicidal tendencies. And lo and behold, I was ignored. The industry spokesperson said I'm talking a lot of rubbish. They put the transmitters up and they had the biggest suicide rate in Wales ever in its history. And this isn't a one-off. There are quite a lot of suicide studies, quite a lot, pages of them, from microwave irradiation. One of the first symptoms for adults and children is depression, then severe depression. In fact, one of the studies here, I spoke of 14 epidemiological studies, and one of the studies here was actually carried out by the industry itself. And its conclusion was, if you are near a transmitter, it can cause the cancer initiators and cancer promoters in the body to become active. And by sheer coincidence, an article appeared in Scientific America on cancer, and it said if the cancer initiators and cancer promoters are activated, they actually did a whole long line written by oncologists on how that can develop into cancer. So there is no case to be defended. Microwaves cause cancer. Not in everybody, in some people. And the question is usually, how many people? And the answer is, well, I don't know. There is, when you do any study, because the industry are very quick to come back, and they will say, we have hundreds, if not thousands, of studies that show microwaves to be safe. And my reply is, you're supposed to. You're supposed to find some studies where things are safe. It's called, mathematically, a distribution curve. And I will explain it just so people can understand. If I could have a thought experiment and I could go to Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris now, which is an enormously busy place, and I could pick every single person up from child to my age in the airport and subject them to an experiment for 10 years. And my experiment would be they had to drink 2 pints of beer a day and smoke 10 cigarettes. You would have a distribution curve. Some people would be ill straight away. Some people would take a little time to be ill. Some people would say, this is great, Barry. Can you double the dose? I'm really enjoying this. And other people would develop symptoms 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the line. It is a typical Bell distribution curve that you will have. If you study trees, fish, study anything, you will always get the same bell-shaped curve. This is why the industry are keen to say, we did this and there was no ill effect. And if we did it on people smoking, some would have no effect and some would die and some, you always have that distribution curve. We'll be stopping in just 15 minutes. And whilst I was in Africa talking, a teacher spoke after me. And this is on the internet, I think that I'll talk there. And he said, childhood suicide and child bad behavior is almost unknown in African children. Almost unknown. He said, we had a transmitter put in our school. Within a few years, every single child in the class, and he had a class of 30, every single child was on Ritalin. Every single one. Okay, right. We're going through these. We've got around 10, 15 minutes. I'm just turning over here things I've already said that other countries have confirmed. And I needn't go on about these. Right. A particularly interesting paper which has been published, the Department of Biophysics and Radiation in Ankara, they have shown that the thyroid in children, which is the master gland, is particularly sensitive to Wi-Fi, the frequency of Wi-Fi radiation, 254 megahertz, 2540 megahertz. It is particularly sensitive to that particular frequency and can cause thyroid problems in children. But they've also said here that that radiation anyway can damage the thyroid in children. And it is followed up with other papers, which you'll excuse me just turning over. Sperm count, we've done that. And a paper, I did mention bones, a research paper from India, where they say the microwaves lead to bone weakening, which is the last thing you want in school children who are trying to build their bones up. Now, to give you an idea of some of the papers, I'm involved in a legal case in the United States where a lovely, delightful young lady, an 11-year-old, I think she's 11 or 12-year-old girl, doesn't want to sit in front of a Wi-Fi set in school. And the school basically said, you're here, you will do what we say, and if you don't, take us to court. And she did take them to court. She has a law firm supporting her free of charge. I'm supporting her free of charge with a few other people from around the world. And to give you an idea of the scale of papers, one of the lawyers representing the girl, and the case isn't over, one of the lawyers representing the girl has highlighted 5,000 papers to support her. 5,000. Now, that is some pool of knowledge. 5,000 papers, which has been submitted in evidence. Now, it is possible to have transmitters taken down. And I'm going to talk about this, and then we'll probably stop for a break. In some of the countries I've been to, they say, well, this transmitter went up, the industry spokesperson came up, and it's usually the same thing. They say, these are radio waves. We fully comply with the ICNIRP certificate, the International Certificate for Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection. We're well within the safety limits. There's no worries about this, Governor. We'll put it up there, sign here, and we'll give you the money. And the transmitter goes up, and in one particular country, within 18 months, people had to start leaving because of the cancers and the leukemias and the illnesses. And I was asked if I would go and represent them. It was a township in Africa. I worked for free, the barrister worked for free, and we took on the industry. And we found, and this may be here, if you want a transmitter taken down in school or near a school or near your house, this worked. And it's worked, as far as I know, 3 times. The industry say we comply with the ICNIRP guidelines, the International Certificate Guidelines. That is not true. It is not true if they haven't followed them. And I have been as far as Australia speaking and all the way back again, and I have yet to find one person, not one person in the world that has read them, especially decision makers. And my first question to the decision makers is, have you read them? No. Well, I have. And here, and this is your legal argument if you want something taken down, because I guarantee they would not have done this, and the transmitters would have been put up illegally. And I'm not a lawyer, this is a lawyer's argument, but if they have lied or not told you the truth, what I'm saying is you may have a case in law to have it taken down. This is the International Certificate, and I have read it, and here on page 545, it says, for example, children, the elderly, and some chronically ill people might have a lower tolerance for one or more forms of this radiation than the rest of the population. Separate guideline levels may be necessary. So what they should have done, if they followed these, is knock on every door, found out who lives there, how sick you are, how old you are, how young you are. They should have documented everybody within the radius of the transmitter, and that should be able to be produced in court. If they haven't done it, they have not complied with the international certificate. Not complied. It gets better. I don't half cause trouble, I can tell you now. I'm really not liked anywhere. It says here, and this is the main one, it says here, in practice, it says, decision makers should review current scientific literature and determine an appropriate reduction factor for known illnesses from radiation. In other words, they should show evidence of reading current scientific literature, and they should say, right, this paper says this level is dangerous, this paper says this is dangerous. We will set our safety level for the school or the hospital or the nursing home or whatever here. And that requires scientific evidence and explanation. And it is movable. If another paper is published, it goes down. What they normally do is there's a big scaffold thing, and the transmitter goes bonk, and then a few months later, bonk, 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 some more, and then a year later, dong, 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 and before you know where you are, it looks like Jodrell Bank or a space station, and there is no limit on what is coming out. But they have not agreed. If they say to you, we have abided by the international certificate, they must be able to produce this. And if they can't, then they have not told the truth. And I don't know anything about law, but I have known 3 cases where transmitters have been taken down because if they went to court, they would have lost. This is the international certificate scientific paper. And as I say, one of the questions which I ask every scientist is what is the safe level for children? And they actually openly admit. This was published in 2009. And the International Commission say another gap in research is children. No study population to date has included children. They might be particularly susceptible to harmful effects. They are likely to accumulate many years of exposure during their lives. Now, if that's what they're saying, there is no safe level for a child which is known. That's it. And if there is no safe level, why is Wi-Fi in schools? If there is no safe level. Now, this is a study. It is a study on children without your consent. And that's important. That is legal. They started studying children in 2009. They are looking for cancers, brain damage, illnesses. That requires your consent. And I wonder how many parents, after listening to me for an hour, would say, where's the form? I'll give my consent for Wi-Fi. But they don't. They just plonk the Wi-Fi up. They usually give them free computers or something because it's cheaper. In comes the profit. And your grandchildren are going to pay the price. As I said when on the television, people that saw me this afternoon, I have 2 aims with my talk here. Sometimes I'm successful in countries and sometimes I'm not. One of my aims is to protect the future generation of your children. With that in mind, I did ask if I could see your Queen, because she has power to actually make people come and listen and decide. If anybody knows her, I would desperately like to speak to her tomorrow before I fly back. And I have a letter from a king. I have a letter from a king that I sat, I'm not boasting here, I sat and had lunch with. And I can give your Queen this king's personal telephone number. I can't give it to anybody else. I can give her his phone number. She can telephone him. He is further down the line than you are, and he can explain exactly what is going to happen to your country. That is one of the things I want to do. So I'm going to stop there. It is time for a break, and you're probably bored to death with me anyway. I'm going to stop there. Thank you so much for being so kind, and we will continue after your break. Thank you. I just want to say 3 things before I start. I have a correction to make, and I'm terribly sorry. I said that the Council of Europe wrote ban all mobiles, all Wi-Fi from school. That was the case when I got the paper. A legal person here has updated me and said it now reads a wired system is preferred. My question would be why? Why a wired system would be preferred. But legally that is important, and I thank the gentleman for pointing that out. Another gentleman said you can take the batteries, and he's very expert on electronics. You can take the batteries out of your phone and they can't track you. That is true unless, and these 2 gentlemen, and another gentleman I've just been talking to here, there's some very, very clever people here, who understands ground currents, and that is an immensely difficult topic. I can't talk about ground currents. It's an immensely difficult topic. But while I'm not going to point these gentlemen out in case they don't wish to be identified, but if one school decides they're going to challenge Wi-Fi and have it taken out, maybe these gentlemen would offer the legal, the electronic, the physics know-how to argue for you in case of, for the school. It may be. And you only need one. And I've found out in countries, you only need one school to get Wi-Fi taken out. Because the mothers in the next school who know those mothers say, well, hang on, I know her and I trust her, and if they're worried about it, these are my children now here in this school. And you get the domino effect. And it starts to go quite quickly. And it's happening now in Canada. The gentleman who said you can take the batteries out, he is correct. But there is a system, I didn't go into it, there is a system called CELDAR. It was developed about 12 years ago. They now have very, very advanced types of CELDAR where they don't need to track your cell phone. It works from cell towers. And the cell tower can beam a microwave through your house onto your body when you're sleeping. The computer, it's like radar, only from cell towers, they call it CELDAR. The computer takes away any static objects like houses, buildings, trees, and as you walk around, the computer just follows you with microwaves. It'll follow you going anywhere. And it's another way of watching people. And if they want to be really mean, and I didn't bring this up earlier, there are a list of microwaves when they're used as weapons. There are a list of pulse frequencies which can be used to entrain the brain or mess around with the normal, natural, vibrational frequency of the body. You have lots of natural vibrational frequencies in your body. Your organs have a frequency, your glands, your cells, your brain has its own frequencies, and they can mess those up. And to give you an example, it's called entrainment. It's known that a child making a cell phone call for 2 minutes, the brain takes 2 hours to come back to normal. So if a child is in a playground and rings another child, that child's brain will not function properly for 2 hours. It's called long-term potentiation, and it can go on. It's been known to go on for 6 weeks. But I didn't want to go too much into that because it gets enormously complex. But there are, to my knowledge, up to 600 pulse frequencies that can alter different bits of your body. And this is how the governments experiment on people, with either implants, putting out pulse frequencies, or they can put them with microwaves from Zelda. It's how they experiment on people. Now, before I start, I'm just going to, this drawing again, this is really what you need if you're going to take on the school principals or the industry. I forgot why I did it. I did it for a school somewhere that wanted something they could understand. And I'm going to give this now to the doctor so that I know I haven't taken it back to England with me. If you photocopy it, it's best in colour. It is copyright free. You can run as many copies as you like, and you can make a book if you like. You can do what you like with it. It's copyright free. And if I can give it to the doctor, it should only be the cost of what it is to run it through a colour photo printer. I can give that to you, sir. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to whiz on, and I will give my home address and phone number, and I will take all criticisms from anybody. If you've read something and you don't like it, by all means, challenge me, and I will take all questions, but this is an immense topic, and I cannot guarantee that I know the answer to every question. Now, I'm going to talk about general cancers for adults, for us now, just for a little while. This is the breast of a lady. It is immensely cancerous, and she used to drive a lot. And whilst driving, she used to like to use her cell phone, and she used to tuck it into her bra. And this was the result. Now, one case obviously doesn't make this to be true. But there isn't just one case. There are 45 research papers here on breast tissue turning cancerous from low-level microwaves. 45. And if you think about it, ladies tend to carry cell phones in their bags, and they tend to have the bags over the shoulder. And the shoulder is leaning, or the bag is leaning against the breast. It is the nearest point of contact for the microwaves. One other thing which a professor told me when I was speaking in Canada, Professor Magda Havers, incredibly clever lady, she said that there is an experiment now, and it may be on this list, I can't remember. In some bras, they have metal things. It shows how long I've been married, I can't remember. They have metal things under the cups. Now, she did say, and I know this as a physicist, that if you have a metal curvature under the cup, metal attracts microwaves, metal absorbs microwaves. And it's one of the reasons why you don't put a spoon in a microwave oven is because the metal absorbs the microwaves and then it re-emits it, usually in a spark and other waves. Now, if you have a cup under your breast, this is a parabolic shape. In other words, if microwaves go into this, it will it's like with a torch, the shiny bit behind the torch. You will get the microwaves being, or different waves, once they've been absorbed, and the electrons go down, you will have different waves coming out, but they will have a focal point, like a torch. And that focal point may only be a few hundred mammary cells big. And this may be the cause of the trouble. It's known that mammary cells do not like radiation. Why? I don't know, and I've never been able to talk to somebody who does, but there must be something about the mammary cells that do not like being irradiated. So, breast cancer, it seems to come up on all of the research papers when you start looking, and one of the first things to come out, you get breast cancers, miscarriages, that sort of thing. Now, I'm trying to adjust my watch for the time here. When the cell towers first went up, a very clever lady, and I've met her, a very clever lady who is a scientist in her own right, decided to do a simple survey around how many transmitters did she choose? Let's just have a look at this. 19. She did a simple survey in Devon, where I live in England, a simple survey around 19 transmitters of new cancers. She found 92 cases around 19 transmitters. The average age was 39, and they were of the breast, thyroid, bowel, and leukemia. The industry and the government said she was stupid and she was wrong, and it was nothing to worry about. But earlier I told you that there were 14 epidemiological studies, in other words, 10-year studies with thousands of people, and one of them, the industry found its own microwaves triggered the cancer promoters and cancer initiators. But there was an even better study, and it was carried out in Estonia. And what they did, and it was published in the Australasian Journal of Environmental Medicine. Before they put the towers in, the cell towers in, they studied the cancers of the whole population. Then they put the towers in and they waited. And they found that there was an increase in cancers, a steep increase in cancers, and they made the observation that women, and I'm not being sexist here, they found that women suffered more than men with cancers from the transmitters. In fact, I can tell you the order of illness when there are studies. It always starts with the embryo, the fetus, the infant, the child, the lady, then usually adolescents, sick people, and finally men. It's usually that order. But they found that the women suffered more than men. And it's not because women are weaker or anything like that. It is because they have immensely complex hormone systems, which are very easily disrupted by microwaves. That paper was followed up by another one here, by the Albert Einstein Avenue. This is the, I can't read French, I do apologize, Louis Pasteur in France. And it says here, women significantly more than men. Women suffer significantly more than men. So I'm sorry, ladies, but you're getting a bit of a raw deal listening to me here. There is further proof for adults. This is a paper, 2011, and the university here, it says they have a direct link to 4,924 cancer deaths from a particular radius around the transmitters. They studied the before and answer. This is in Brazil. And again, another doctor here, a professor, I do apologize to him, has written in a separate paper, there is a proven link between microwaves, cancer, leukemia, and a high risk of Alzheimer's. But this is nothing new. It was published in the year 2000. This paper, Evidence Radiation is Genotoxic, in other words, cancer-causing, and it was made for the parliaments of New Zealand, Italy, Austria, Ireland, and the European Parliament in Brussels. And the conclusion of this paper, cell phones will highly probably increase many neurological diseases and brain tumors over the next 10 to 20 years. Cell sites will highly probably increase miscarriage, many cancers, many diseases, significant neurological and cardiac diseases, and death. And a recent paper, cancer in the EU has now reached epidemic levels, which doesn't make good reading. And in some countries, they have now published a paper where, for the first time ever, cancers are now exceeding birth rates. One interesting thing for any of you who employ people and insist they carry a cell phone, this is the Italian court ruling of a man who proved he got a tumor in his head from his cell phone that he used for work. And the employer, according to the legal document I have, the employer was ordered to pay 60% of the compensation for the gentleman. Now, if you're an employer and you insist people have cell phones, this is a European country making a ruling, so it could be legally, and I'm not getting into law because as soon as I do I get told off, it could be a legal problem. Now, with cancers, a study came out that actually the conclusion was cell phones actually prevent cancers. And I read this with enormous disbelief. But when you see something like this, you need to check the statistics. There are, to my knowledge, at least 15 different ways of calculating figures mathematically. And in this particular study, although it said over a 10-year period, a heavy user is 40% more likely to develop glioma, which is a type of brain tumor, 40% more likely. They define heavy use as 6.7 hours per month. But even with that, the statistics here, once they were looked at, they eliminated everybody under the age of 30, which are usually the heaviest users because it's children. As I say, the average use, they define average as 2.5 hours a month, and they eliminated people who use more than one cell phone. In other words, people who use a cell phone for work and a cell phone for home. So when you start messing around with the statistics, you need to check these things when you get a paper that says cell phones actually prevent cancer. You've really got to look carefully at these. For adults here, this is the University of Vienna. We therefore conclude that induced DNA damage cannot be based on thermal effects. In other words, the thermal effect that they say is safe. Below that, what they're saying is you can have DNA damage below thermal effects. Okay. And I did talk about children. This is the paper that I used, where it says here, and scientific proof that these interactions affect especially the bone marrow. I had a telephone call from, I won't mention the country because I believe the union is taking legal action against the Tetra airwave system. I had a telephone call only about 2 weeks ago from a police officer, and he said, some of our officers are developing cancer of the eye. Do you know anything about it? And I said, well, I do know there is a paper published about cancer of the eye. And he said, we have our transmitters on our chest here, and the aerial comes up where it transmits. And of course, when the officers talk, they sort of lean down, and the transmitter is right by the eye. And they're finding that officers are getting cancer of the eye, the same eye. And in fact, there is a paper on this. Scientists, this is from the Times, scientists link eye cancer to mobile phones. It has been established. Okay. If there are any oncologists here, excuse me, I did give a presentation in 2003 to consultant oncologists of the link between where the industry left off and where cancer begins. And you're welcome to my paper. I just wanted to talk briefly about adults, and particularly breast cancer. It may be a good idea. You can get protective bags that you can put cell phones in so they do not transmit unless you take them out. Or another thing you can do is use a child's metal pencil case that they sometimes take to school and put the cell phone in there. But I would certainly keep them away from your breast area. I'm going to finish with this last section and then take all criticisms and questions. And I'll give my address as well. Now, when I was in Africa, I'm moving on to animals now, because the scientists here will know, and I'm not being disrespectful here, but the DNA in you is no different from the DNA in any other living animal or any other plant. Any plant can genetically read our DNA code. Any plant, any tree can read our DNA code. The basis that makes DNA is the same. So it stands to reason, if you're going to do something that injures humans, you're also going to injure the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom, because we're basically all the same. The microwaves don't distinguish. And whilst I was in Africa, in one country, a gentleman came to me and said, "Would you come to my field?" And I said, "Of course I will." And I went to his field, and he said, "What do you hear, Barry?" And I said, "Well, there's something in the trees over there, and something moving over there, but nothing else." And he said, "Normally, you and I would be shouting to make ourselves heard." He said, "All of these bushes here, vitamin C producing bushes," he said, "they would normally now be pollinated by bees." He said, "Since that transmitter went up, I haven't had a single bee come to my field." And he said, "What is worse," he said, "I haven't had a single ant." And that confused me for a little while. And he said, ants are immensely important to us farmers. He said, because the ants crawl over our fruit bushes and they lick the sweet substance on the leaves, but they don't harm the plant. But if any insect lands on the plant to eat it, the ants swarm to protect the plant. So the ants keep our plants safe. He said, "I've lost my ants and I've lost my bees." And that was down to a transmitter. And he certainly wasn't the only person. There are animal studies. This one here, this is a 20-page document on animals near transmitters that have been found dead, deformed, had their immune systems compromised. They've had birth problems, birth defects, genetic defects, and the animals in the study, and this is a reputable study, were cows, cats, dogs, hamsters, whales, birds, bees, bats, and butterflies in this one study. I was very honored twice to give a talk at the Glastonbury Festival. It's a festival in England where academics and people who study nature and doctors and everywhere, they all go and they have conferences and talks. And one of the talks I was asked to give, 2008, was to the Beekeepers Association. And in the back of this paper, which I believe is on the internet, in the back of this paper, there are 14 references, some by university professors who are beekeepers. And you can't get more knowledgeable than a university professor who is a beekeeper. And they all, references come to the same conclusion that the poor bumblebee or honeybee, they do not stand a chance against the microwave industry, not a chance. Because the resonant frequency of the transmitters is the resonant frequency of the bee. And there are other things also with the bee which are irritated, again, by the pulse frequencies and the microwaves. The bee doesn't stand a chance. A veterinary clinic in Germany decided to look into this for itself. And they published a paper here. experiences from a veterinary clinic, cause of illness, electromagnetic high frequency is the microwave from domestic telephone systems and networks for your house pets. And they conclude that the animals they are treating, some of them are being made ill by the communications industry. I think, I'll just have a little bit of water here. I think this is one of the saddest pictures I've ever seen. I'm a really big softie, I can tell you now. I think this is one of the saddest pictures I've ever seen. I don't know why. It just is. It's a swan. And a transmitter. What country is this in? I can't see. It's a swan. And a transmitter was turned on where the swans have a flight path. And the swan was trapped in the magnetic field. And all the swan could do was go round and round and round and round until it died. And swans mate for life. And this one, the people here, they begged the industry to turn the transmitter off before the swan died. And they said no. They said no because if they did and the swan flew off, it would prove that they were guilty. But arguably, the most academic scientific paper in the world, Nature, I think the same firm also published Scientific America, excuse me, they have an article in here, resonant effects, the mechanism for avian magnetic compass. For the scientists here, we're looking at the cryptochrome double electron absorption mechanism, but Nature have published an article here explaining why birds will be misled by magnetic waves. The magnetic waves go in the brain, and to put it simply, it's roughly 640 times stronger than the Earth's magnetic field that they use. So if you are using one force, the Earth's magnetic field, and another one is 640 times stronger, it's going to force you off course. And this is what's happening. The same thing happens in humans. We have the same system in our brains, as do ants, bees, bats, that they all have that system. So if it works for one, it works for other. Again here, there are a list of 20 experiments, all peer-reviewed independently and published. By peer-reviewed, I mean scientists have written a paper, they have subjected it to peer review by somebody they don't know, they have read it, checked it, said this is okay, we will publish. There are 20 of them here on birds. Everything from storks to sparrows. So there is no doubt that birds are being affected. And here's another one on birth defects for storks. If a stork's nest is near a transmitter, then the stork will have birth defects. Okay. Now, those of you who are botanists and you're thinking, well, at least we've got away with this, well, I'm sorry. Again, there are 28 peer-reviewed and published studies on trees, plants, bushes being affected by electromagnetic waves. Usually it involves the plant's immune system being suppressed, and the plant then is subjected to plant virus, plant microorganisms. Now, as far as big animals, a farmer found that when his cows were near transmitters, they had birth defects. They also gave less milk and less or poorer quality milk. And this was written up and published, but it's not the only study. It's certainly not the only study. Here, the Bavarian state government found that when you moved cattle away from transmitters, they recovered. When you moved them back, they became ill again, as did the universities of Hanover and the German Army University, Veterinary University in Munich. Now, they've all found that cattle suffer, and the gentleman who came to speak to me earlier here may be interested. The cause is believed to be the cattle standing on wet ground and having ground currents. And it's an immensely complex topic, and he may want to consider that. But when you think of it, cows, they eat grass and they say moo, and that's it. They do not sit in circles reading Scientific American and arguing over the finer points of milk yield. They have no way of knowing whether they're in danger or not. So that is really a blind study. Another study has been carried out on whales and published, and it's been in the paper, where waves, all sorts of waves, are used in the oceans, underneath the oceans, for submarine warfare and all sorts of complicated things. And the navigation system of whales, porpoises, dolphins, mammals each, like us, will suffer. And they are being beached. And I rang the minister, our fisheries minister, to complain about this. And I will never forget his words. He said to me, "It's their fault for being in that part of the ocean." Now, that's the level of intelligence we have running England. A professor of radiation, possibly the cleverest man in England, or the UK even, Bristol University, Professor Dennis Henschel, radiology department, physicist. He has published a list, or he has quoted a list here of around 8,000 papers, 8,000, concerning low-level microwaves and defects in animals, from animal navigation to magnetic absorption in plants to the resonance in animals, around 8,000 papers, and not one is being listened to. Now, a paper, or in fact, three papers have been published over the last few years concerning the communications industry. And it concerns the carbon dioxide emissions being released into the atmosphere. If you think about it, we now have millions of cell phone towers and baby towers. There are billions, literally billions, I think something like 6 billion, I could be wrong, but it's an enormous amount of people with cell phones in the world. And then you have all your iPads and iPods and all these computer things. They all have batteries, and all the batteries need charging. And the whole system needs an electricity supply. And that produces carbon dioxide. And here, when this paper was written in 2009, it was more carbon dioxide from the industry into the atmosphere than all of the aeroplanes in the world. So year for year, the industry is now the biggest polluter on the planet with carbon dioxide. And there is another paper. Now, you may not or may believe in global warming. I can see arguments for both sides. But there is one thing which we do know. If you have carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and it mixes with water vapor has hydrogen, has a hydrogen molecule there. The hydrogen will join with the carbon dioxide and make carbonic acid. And the carbonic acid will come down as acid rain. And that is now causing the world a problem. An article published about the state of the oceans. It is a very, very thin line between what can survive in the oceans and what can't when you change the acidity of the water. A very, very delicate thin line. And it may interest the people causing this to know that most of our oxygen on this planet does not come from trees, it comes from the plankton in the oceans. And it says here, carbon dioxide emissions are making the oceans more acidic, imperiling the growth and reproductive species of plankton to squid. If we're not careful, we are going to destroy ourselves. The pollinating insects and I'm going to come to this in a few pages' time. If we destroy the pollinating insects annually, if the cost of food does not go up, if we destroy the pollinating insects annually, it will cost this planet $0.4 trillion in lost production. And that has to be made up. And that will be made up by a rise in the cost of living. $0.4 trillion. And this is the Times producing this. Not a scientist sitting down with nothing to do on a wet Saturday afternoon. It's the Times. The total cost of the environment, the whole environment, to the world, if we go as far as to ruin it, I think I did have, here it is. The total cost of the entire environment, if we use it, is 33 trillion a year. And somebody will have to pay for that. The more that gets ruined, the more you have to pay. And the health costs are going to go up. In 2002, it was estimated that 9.8 million Americans were off work sick because of electromagnetic illness. 9.8 million. And that was 10 years ago. I haven't seen a figure since. So, what are the governments doing about it? You could guess what I'm going to say here, can't you? I saw my Member of Parliament, Mel Stride. I saw my Member of Parliament, and I explained the problem to him that was taking place in England, and I said, please may I have a short interview with the Prime Minister. I was particularly worried about Wi-Fi and the future generations. And he wrote me a letter saying the Prime Minister is too busy to discuss this. Okay, it was what I expected. I then saw the schools minister. I saw Nick Gibb, Minister Nick Gibb. And I presented him with the same problem, and I put down a document, and his exact words to me were, I won't read it. So there is nothing I can do to help my own country. An article was published, this is again in the Times, and the gentleman here, he looked, when you have these prime ministers going from European countries and they all meet somewhere and they say, we are now going to cut down emissions, we're going to do this, we're going to save the frogs, we're going to do everything. Over the years, he looked at all of the promises that the prime ministers of all of the countries have made. And he followed through all of the schemes. And you can guess how many actually reached their conclusion. None. Not a single one has ever been carried out. Not one. And finally, and then I'm going to take questions and criticisms. I'm not boasting here because I can assure you the last thing I really want is to be famous or even well known. Being honest, I would much sooner my telephone didn't ever ring. But don't let that put you off. I promise to answer it. I have probably sat down around the world, and I've been right to Australia and back, zigzagging countries. I have probably sat down with between 40 and 50 royal people, leaders of governments, leaders of countries, leaders of councils, people who have been very important but absolutely nameless, which doesn't matter, I still talk to them. And I wish I were the person that had been clever enough to think this up, but I wasn't. I found that when I was sitting down talking to them, the same story started to repeat itself, sometimes with more pieces, sometimes with less. And one king summed it up beautifully. We were sitting down, having a meal, and he just leaned forward on the table and he said, I can tell you what's happening, Barry. He said, I am losing the viability of my country. And when I said to you, there are two things I would like to try and do whilst I'm in Denmark. One is protect your future generations from genetic damage, which I've explained thoroughly. The other, I want to see if you can maintain the viability of your country, because it is at risk. And these are long-term things, and I'm not doing this because if you succeed, I'm going to be famous, because I will be dead long before any of these happen. But the king, we had a very serious and a very long talk. And he is much more clever than I believe he is Oxford or Cambridge educated with a law degree. And he said, and others have told me this, I'm really summarizing everything up now. What happens is, the industry comes along. They offer vast incentives to various people who are going to sign contracts and governments, and they get the contract signed. Usually, if they can, for lots and lots of microwave power to go all over the country unrestricted, including Wi-Fi. Then you start to get the illnesses. 18 months on, the illnesses will start. That can, and there are various figures, and you can take it more or less, but I think the best paper I've seen written on this for estimates is by Dr. Andrew Goldworthy. It could be as much as 40% on your health bill. Now, if you think the millions and millions and millions of people who are going to be ill, as I've already read out, they all need drugs. Some need operations. Then you have your genetically deformed children. Children with autism, children with epilepsy, and we know microwaves can cause this. When you start looking at all of this, it's going to be an immense cost to your health bill. The people who benefit most, of course, are the drug companies. So your health bill is going to go up, and that is a promise. That's going up. Now you look at your pollinating insects and your animals. They are going to become sick. You are going to need to, or possibly start to need, importing food, because you may not be able to produce everything that you need, or you may not be able to export everything that you need. And this is happening now in other countries. So there could be a cost to, or a loss where you export food or you import food. Then there is your sickness where you can't work. And finally, when you look at the rest of the equation, supposing there are 1 million cell phones in Denmark, 1 million cell phones in Denmark, and supposing the bill for each person on average is one of your kroners a day. Apart from what stays behind in taxes, advertising, running shops, that sort of thing, a lot of that money leaves the country. Most of it to the United States or Japan. Most of it leaves the country daily. And when you total up, and this is the other countries the king's talking to me and people, when you total up the cost of health, the cost to people not working, the food production, the loss to the industries going out, any 5-year-old child that can understand how a money box works, when you put some in and you take more out, will say eventually, and it depends on which country, eventually you are headed for bankruptcy. The poor countries suffer enormously very quickly. like the gentleman farmer I told you, who said, I can no longer grow fruit. We now have to buy it from somewhere else. So this is going to slowly erode your finances. The interesting thing that came after this was what people have told me. They said, when we find we need drugs we can't afford, food we can't afford, and to pay workers, the first thing that happens is the very countries who are causing the problem are the first countries to come in with aid. And there is a cost to the aid. And the cost to the aid is either mining rights, immigration rights, land for military bases. There is a cost. And this is why the king said to me, he said, and I think he used the term 50 years, or maybe it stuck in my brain, I don't know, but he said, I am going to lose the viability of my country unless I can act. He says, but I am locked in government contracts and I don't have the power to change them. And that is a problem which you could have here. I don't know how wealthy you are, but maybe there are economists here and people that can look into it, but it could happen here. And you could lose the viability of your country. And in one country, where I was, again a gentleman came up to me and he said, you see that land over there, Barry? And I said, yep. And he said, that used to be my farm. He said, I used that farm to feed my family. He said, that was my life. He said, and then all of a sudden, there was an American base there. He said, and I was cycling to my farm one day, and there's a man with a gun. And he said, turn round and go back. And I explained, that is my farm, I have to feed my family, and I need to go to work. And the American Army personnel chap said, if you go past me, I have every right to shoot you, and I will. This is American land. You will not pass me. And he said, all I could do was turn around and go home and then wonder what I could do. And this is now happening. And I am suggesting, I don't know, I'm not a fortune teller, and I don't know much about your country, but it could happen, and it needs to be monitored, and it needs to be looked out for. And it is one of the reasons why I would like to talk to your Queen. It's not the reason that the King gave me. He wants to talk to her about something different, but it is something that you need to look out for. So the two things I really wanted to get across: you are really, really endangering the future generations of your Danish children, really. And secondly, unless somebody clever monitors this and can talk to somebody in power, you could lose the viability of your country in future years. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Right. I'll give my address before I forget. If anyone has a pen, I will give my home address and home telephone number, if anybody wants it. You need to, a lot of the papers I've had published or written are on the internet, but you need to be able to spell my name correctly. It is Barry with an I-E, B-A-R-R-I-E, B-A-R-R-I-E. It is Barry Trower, T-R-O-W-E-R, Barry Trower. And my address is Trower, T-R-O-W-E-R. My address is number 3, Flowers Meadow, Liverton, that's L-I-V-E-R-T-O-N, Devon, D-E-V-O-N, and the postcode is T for Tommy, Q for Quebec, the number 12, 1, 2, the number 6, U for uniform, P for Papa. TQ12, 6 UP, like the drink 7-Up, only 6-Up. My telephone number from here is 0044 1626 821 014. 014. Yeah, 821 014. I always answer letters within 24 hours, even if I sit up all night, because I can't afford to leave them over. I leave phone calls until after I've done my letters, and usually if I'm away, obviously like now, there'll be a stack of messages. I do have an answer phone, and if you leave a message, I will promise to get back to you. But I don't run away, and I will be answering questions tomorrow around the back there. You can talk to me as long as you like about anything you like. Anyone from the Secret Service wants to talk to me, or the police, or anybody about schools or anything at all, I'll happily take the questions confidentially with anybody. Or you can write to me, or you can telephone me, or I'll take them now. We have sort of 20 minutes. I'll take them now.
Hello. First of all, thank you for a nice lecture.
Hello, sir. Thank you.
Usually in power politics, there's a smaller group of people exercising their power over a larger group of people exercising their power over a smaller group of people. And there's like a clear distinction between who's being affected by the power. What seems to be confusing in this matter is that the one exercising the power is also being affected by their own power. I mean, there are so many transmitters all over the place. So I mean, you mentioned the drug industry. Even though you own a drug industry, you cannot really avoid these transmitters.
No, you're absolutely right,
yeah,
sir.
How do you explain that? I mean, from a rational perspective, it seems stupid to be exercising some kind of power that affects you in return. You know what I mean?
Are you, was the first part of your talk, I have trouble here, was the first part of your talk suggesting I come into your politics?
Come into what?
I become a Danish politician.
No, just like biopolitics in general.
I see. I used to live in the part of the United. My ancestors all come going right back, all my ancestors come from the very part of the United Kingdom where the Vikings landed. And they settled as farmers. So I'm probably half Viking. So if you want me to be a Danish minister, then yes, I can. But did you say there was a small percentage of people making decisions for the whole country?
Yes, but I was talking more like in a global way, that everyone is affected by this.
Everyone is affected by
Everyone
this.
is affected, even those making the decisions.
Yep, you're right, sir.
So, that just seems like a paradox.
The problem I find is that I've been to one country, and a professor actually said this publicly, so I can say it. I'm talking about Malta. For Malta, just one person made the decision to have transmitters everywhere for the whole country without even talking to another single person. One person. Now, the question is, you have a small group of people who seem to make decisions that affect not only them, but the rest of the country. We do in England. There are probably only about 5 people who make the decisions for the whole of the UK. And why these people do it, I don't know. In England, maybe they're expecting a knighthood. Maybe they get a nice big job and a Rolls Royce and a big house, and they think, this is worth it for my life. Maybe they are so selfish that
But I mean, their kids are still going to a school where there's Wi-Fi. Those people, which perhaps are going to get knighted or...
The only other reason, unless they're so selfish that they think, I'm going to take all of this and they can suffer, is it's what I call intentional ignorance. They are deliberately ignorant. Like when I gave the minister my document and he said, I won't read it. Maybe they are scared to read these things because if they do, they know they will have to act. If you write to them, they won't reply. Because if they reply, it means they've read it. It's what I call intentional ignorance. I don't know why they do it. I don't know what sort of people they are. My vocabulary can't even think of a word to describe them. I can't even think of anything to describe that sort of person that will let his own countrymen and women and children suffer for that reason. And say with Wi-Fi in schools. I can't even think of a word that describes them.
Yes, I also wanted to thank you for this vital information you warn us and share with us.
My pleasure, sir.
But I would like to add the puzzle piece, which is also very important, which I got from my research.
Absolutely, sir.
And that is, it is not the electromagnetic waves making the trouble that you mentioned. It is the scalar waves, or the so-called Tesla waves.
Are you talking about the pulse system?
The cell phone technology. Because a cell phone is using electromagnetic waves to transport the information. But using that, they also use partly scalar waves. They are a kind of waste, a kind of noise.
In with the electromagnetic wave?
Yeah, they are another kind of wave. Electromagnetic wave or a transversal wave. And the scalar wave is a longitudinal wave, the Tesla wave.
Yeah,
that is a big difference because it is the scalar wave, the longitudinal wave, which is biologically relevant. And as far as we are not dividing those kinds of waves, we never will succeed to get a shelter because we are on the wrong track.
The electromagnetic waves today, I will agree, they do have lots of other waves riding with them. Lots of other waves.
Yes.
The scalar waves, you can have radio waves, you can have all sorts of waves in with. But I will have to disagree with you, sir, and we will have to have a friendly disagreement here. The original microwave weapons used on the US Embassy from Moscow were low-level microwaves only, which caused the illnesses. And the microwave weapons were microwaves. I will agree that you have the other waves in, and they are, or they can be as dangerous and more dangerous. And I would agree with you that each of them on its own can be dangerous.
Yes, I agree that in Moscow they used microwaves, the usual waves. But now the next point is coming. There is already technology to make cell phones with scalar waves not being a damage.
You're right. Yep, I will agree.
Yes, and then you have the advantage. There is no cancer caused and things like that. And you don't need batteries in those cell phones because the energy is coming through the scalar wave, and you can't eavesdrop the scalar waves because they go peer-to-peer. They go directly from the transmitter to the receiver, and no Secret Service can interfere. So that is a real advantage. So you should add to your information that the cell phone technology is changing, that they are going from the usual electromagnetic waves to the scalar waves. The technology is already in use by some secret parts in the society, but it should made be public. Then you get rid of all the problems. Thank you.
Yeah. I will agree with you, sir. There is a way of making them safe. I will agree with you, and there are, to my knowledge, at least 2 different ways of making them safe. But at the moment, at this point in time, Wi-Fi and the cell phones are not safe. When they bring them in, I will agree, but there are ways of making them safe. I will agree that.
Barry. Hey.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, hey, great to see you. Of course, I've just realised that although I've heard you speak at numerous events before, we actually live about 3 miles from each other, I think. So. Bit ironic. I'm in Newton Abbot.
Oh, you could have given me a lift.
I probably could have. Well, no, I came the long way round. I came the scenic route. Anyway, hey, listen, excellent presentation, of course, as always. And, you did an excellent job of explaining what's going on with Wi-Fi in the schools. Can you share your thoughts with us, though, on the global agenda for smart meters? Because, of course, the issue here is that with schools, at least you have the option of keeping your under 3, 4, 5, whatever, away from Wi-Fi. But with smart meters, the agenda being to put a smart meter into every house.
Smart meters, they vary from... A smart meter, if anyone isn't sure, it's like a gas, an electric, probably a water meter. Do they use them for water? That will transmit microwaves. I'm not too well up on smart meters. I haven't had time to study them. And if you know more, would you please tell people? I do know that smart meters... If I've got this correct, somebody doesn't need to come round to the house to read the meter to bill you. They transmit it.
They are using the cell phone system, the GSM system.
That's it.
So they are also making the same electrosmog. They are also making the same electrosmog as our cell phones do, and therefore it's right. It's exactly on the point. Also a problem on that topic.
But eventually, the whole objective of the smart meter is that every single electrical device in your house will communicate wirelessly with the smart meter.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And if you live in a very busy block of flats or a busy street, it's a lot more microwaves. And as I say, until the gentleman said, there is technology, and I do know 2 different systems where they are trying to make the microwaves totally safe. But at the moment, it isn't. And I know it is coming in and I know it's being tested, but at the moment, with your girls in school and Wi-Fi, that is what I'm arguing about today. But Wi-Fi, smart meters, they are microwave transmitters. It varies from street to street, block of flats to block of flats. They can feed onto one central smart meter that then feeds to the tower, or they can all feed to the tower. I do know their power varies, but they are microwave transmitters, and there is a lot of objection to them around the world. I do know that. But I haven't had time to study smart meters. I'm still too busy doing all this. But I do know that there are people writing papers on smart meters and analyzing them and studying them. It's such a big area, this, and you're better off going to a computer and putting in smart meter and seeing what's been published. But they are microwave transmitters, without a shadow of a doubt. And they will carry the same risks as any other microwave transmitter. And depending where your bedroom is, I suppose, in the house, or where they are, could depend on how much at risk you are. Is that okay? I don't really know much about smart meters, I must confess.
I can just add a comment here, because in my house in Silkeborg I have got a smart meter installed, and I got this tickling with my eye when he started to remove the old one, because I also have known a lot about this discussions on the internet. And so I called the electrical company and said, what is the plan with this? Can I now expect that microwave communication is going out here? And he said that, and the other thing was that the name of this smart meter was Echelon. So in my business, so I called and I got a very nice guy at the electric company who explained for me that there are two possibilities with smart meters. There are the possibility that the communication are going through the copper, as today, through the wire, or it can go wireless. And I said to him that I was happy to hear that, and he also explained for me it was going through the wire from my house. If I would like to have some of the benefits in the future, for example, the burglar alarm or anything else, watching how much electricity my freezer would use, whatever, then it could go in remote, what do you call that, wireless, or it could go via copper, the wire again. So if I installed the wire and was willing to pay for it, I could have nearly the same advantages at this smart meter as I have wireless. So I think if any of you are in questions about that, call your electricity company and say you are willing to pay to get extra wire installed in the house to get the advantages. Sorry?
Did you say, just out of curiosity, that your skin became itchy when it was there?
Yeah, my eye, you know, when
Okay. Yeah. I suppose if you have a smart meter, and I'm just guessing here, if you have a smart meter in a cupboard, you could line the cupboards. Do they actually go into the house and read things? Yeah. Oh, you couldn't line the cupboard then, no. That wouldn't work. Yeah. The microwaves go through the house to read electrical things. Yeah.
But the ultimate plan is smart grid. It's literally global.
Right. So if you have a child's cot and the child has a warming blanket and maybe one of these electrical things that goes around, it will send a beam to the child's cot, read the electricity being used, and bring it back. Well, that says enough, doesn't it? We have just a few more minutes.
There was a gentleman asking earlier, about if you remove about listening in on people. If you remove the battery from the
That's
cell
right,
phone,
yeah.
if that would make any difference, could they still listen in even without the battery?
I have read articles by universities and electricians who have left the communications industry. Now, if you take, the gentleman's right, if you take the battery out, technically it will not work. And they cannot use it to listen in or do anything, if you take the battery out. If the battery is in and it's turned off, one of the other things they can do, and people don't appreciate this, they can use you as a transmitter. In other words, if there is a person making a call over there, and the cell phone tower is over there, slightly out of range, it is possible with some sets for the person's call, without your knowledge, to come into your phone, be boosted, and forwarded to the transmitter. Then the transmitter will reply, and it will go back, and it is using your battery. People don't realize that. So if some people, if they think, I'm going to turn my cell phone off because I don't want the microwaves, it can still be used as a transmitter. And what I say is, by all means, I'm not saying that they're a bad invention. I think if you break down on a lonely road or you're in a life and death situation, it is a brilliant thing to have. And the industry can be made safe. As the gentleman said, there are ways of changing the waves to make them safe. You can also, as they've done in Salzburg, you can turn the power down so that no more than a certain amount of power reaches any single person. There are ways to make it safe. Wi-Fi can be made totally safe. What I would recommend is you carry your cell phone in either what is known as a Faraday cage, which is like a wire mesh bag, that nothing can get in or out, or a child's metal school tin that they put their protractors in, or something like that. Sorry, there's a question over here. Yes, sir. Okay, sir. Yeah, please tell me. Is that the Faraday cage?
Yes.
Yep.
The truth is that I have access to a periodic system where there is 24 elements before hydrogen. These are the elements that are in space, and these are the elements that makes it possible to communicate with spaceships. Without these elements, communication would be impossible. There is no known substance that is able to stop vibrations in these matters. And when you make a cell phone, you want to make it as small as possible. When you do that, the ordinary radio waves you talk about, they are emitted, but they are weak. And then there comes the pressure waves that some call scalar waves. And these waves cannot be stopped by anything. Nothing.
There are...
And the reason the phone companies do this is that it improves the cover of the cell phone net in cellars and inside big buildings.
Yeah, I would disagree with two things there, sir.
Yes.
There are metal mesh bags which I have seen, which can stop the transmissions going in and out.
Yes, they can stop ordinary radio waves, but they cannot stop the other waves.
Yes, there is
Okay.
a very famous experiment. If you put a cell phone in a microwave oven is a Faraday cage. It is meant to be. And no electromagnetic radiation is able to pass through. But if you put your cell phone in the microwave oven and let somebody from the audience make a call, it will give the signal, and you see the light, it's getting through because the scalar waves are getting through. That's the point. And we know that because we are very strongly engaged in mind control. And I'm living in Stockholm, in Sweden, and when I started for my internet TV channel, White TV, to pinpoint and focus on mind control, I got a hint from the Swedish Secret Service. And they said, hey boy, they are using scalar waves. And that's why the targeted individuals, the victims from mind control, never get a shelter in a Faraday cage. Because one of the first steps those poor people do, they go into a Faraday cage, and nothing is better because it's the scalar waves coming through.
Yeah, I've already agreed with you, sir, that you can have other waves in microwaves which will go through.
Yes.
I've already agreed.
And therefore, you can't put your cell phone in a Faraday cage, even if it is small and have it on the body. That is not giving a total shelter, only in relation to the electromagnetic waves. But that are not those making the big trouble. One question from me. If you make a flight mode on the cell phone, is this really safe, or can they eavesdrop even on the flight mode?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question. Okay.
In the cell phones, you have a possibility when you are in the airplane to switch on the so-called flight mode.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And then you can play with it and do anything, but the radiation is stopped. My question is, can they eavesdrop on you even if you have the flight mode on?
In an aeroplane, if you have flight mode on, can you be eavesdropped?
Not on the aeroplane. You make the flight mode downstairs here.
I don't know the power of flight mode, I'm sorry.
My question is about eavesdropping also. You mentioned this guy sweeping the floor and doing the dishes and...
Oh, the spies. Sorry, we're back to spies. Yep.
Yeah, you said he was the man that agencies and governments was most interested in, and that really woke my curiosity, because why is that?
If you look, there's a lot of rubbish written about secret agents. James Bond, which is of course very fictitious, is military intelligence. James Bond is not a secret agent, and he's not a spy. He is military intelligence. A spy, as in the Cold War, when I was talking to them, a spy is somebody who has been trained in a country for around 5 years and smuggled in to another country, usually the United States or England, and their sole purpose is to find people who can be blackmailed. If you're not an intelligence agent and not a spy, and if you're an intelligence officer, if you're not an intelligence officer and you're not a spy, I was an agent. I don't like the term secret agent because people think of James Bond, and I wasn't James Bond. I was an agent. An agent is a gatherer of information which is secret. And that is much different to a spy. Now, with the spies, they will come in, usually in the Cold War during the Cuban Missile Crisis, when we were nearly at war. You would have as many as one a day coming into a country. And the job of the spy was, first of all, to you need work permits, you need a birth certificate, you need identity. And a spy that already has these would focus on people with ordinary jobs. And the best person to focus on, or the best person to, if you could become a spy, the best job you could get would be the cleaner of an office block. Because if you're the cleaner, you have keys. And if you have keys, you can get into filing cabinets or rooms. If you get into a room to clean it, somebody else from that country can always give you a key that will open a few drawers. But the main purpose of the spy is to find somebody who can be blackmailed. Now, there are a lot of people who do a lot of things they would not like on the front page of the Sunday newspaper. It may be that you gamble. It may be that you have a mistress or a lover. It may be you look at pornography, or child pornography. It may be whatever. But they are expert in going through rubbish, looking at telephones, studying people. They've studied for 5 years to find out who has a weakness. So if they found that you had a weakness, let's say you had gambling debts, and you didn't want your wife to know, and children to know, an employer, they could relay this information back to a controller. The controller could come up to you and say, hello, I realize that you have this problem and this problem. This is what we've got on you. What I would like you to do is sign this form that says you have known this person and they've lost their birth certificate or their identity paper. You recognize them and they can get a new one. Or it may be, if you are an influential person like a doctor or a teacher or a lawyer, it may be that they want you to sign a passport form because you're authorized to sign passports. Or it may be they want you to write a reference to give somebody a job who has been in the country maybe for 5 years. And they will work slowly up. They never expect to go home. When they come into your country, they expect to stay. Now, how they go through their training, and I don't have time to tell you, but a person with an ordinary job is usually the most useful because they have access to buildings for cleaning, they tidy bins, they collect rubbish, and it's a very skilled, slow process where you contact people, you blackmail them, you get them to sign pieces of paper because you have as many as 7 people a week that need identity papers. And that's not easy. And in the United States and in England, during the Cold War, there were thousands of spies. Thousands. And their main job is blackmail. So, and the person to target, say the person that they want first is somebody who has access to office blocks. Does that answer your question, sir? Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one there.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
I have some comments. You mentioned a microwave oven. A microwave oven is not a perfect Faraday cage.
Yeah, I didn't want to get into an argument, actually.
So I have made a perfect Faraday cage, and no call will reach that phone. So it's not the scalar waves that are carrying the contact between the tower and the phone, I think. And
I didn't want to get into an argument with the gentleman.
And then you mentioned these bags for putting the cell phones into, and it doesn't make them safe, I think. It will, maybe it will reduce the radiation because of the metal net.
Yep, you could be right, sir. I do know, and I haven't tested them, I do know you can get bags to put them in. And I do know that some police officers are actually putting shielding between the Tetra system and their body.
Yeah, that's a good idea, but the other one, the bags are not a good idea, I think, because they will weaken the signal, and when the signal is weakened, the cell phone will turn up its radiation.
Yeah.
And still the bag will reflect some of that radiation, but there's a hole in the bag, and from that hole the radiation will be much stronger than if the bag was not there.
Yep. If there is a hole in the bag, it will come out. You're absolutely right.
What should be shielded is the space between you and the cell phone, and not the whole cell phone.
You're absolutely right, sir. You're absolutely right.
Hello. Thank you very much for this wonderful information.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just like to, please, I would like to ask you to explain these waves which we have in the brain. I think that you mentioned the theta waves before, and I'm not sure if they are good or bad for the body. If we, I don't know if you can påverka, hur säger man det på engelska? Influence, thank you. I don't know if we can influence the waves in a bad or a good way. Please explain this. Thank you.
There are lots of different ways, and for the scientists here, I'm looking at electrically induced phase transduction, rectification, resonance, both cyclotronic resonance and circadian resonance. You have 4 waves in your brain, alpha, beta, delta, and theta, that help the brain go into different states. Now, the best way to describe entrainment is if you're bouncing, you're a very slim young lady. If you're bouncing on a trampoline, you will bounce at your own vibrational frequency that you feel happy with. Now, if a 56-stone man jumps on your trampoline and bounces at his frequency, you will automatically have to bounce at his frequency because you can't stop yours. You can't make him stop. Does that make sense? You will have to bounce as he bounces. Now, that is entrainment. The microwaves with the pulse frequencies, depending whatever's coming into your brain, and I agree with the gentleman, the tetra waves, the telstar waves, what's coming into the brain can act like that. It's called entrainment. They can make your brain change its natural wave. Now, when this 56-stone man jumps off of the trampoline, you will keep bouncing at his frequency until you can get yours back. And it has been published in a British medical paper that just a 2-minute cell phone call from a child can entrain the child's brain for 2 hours. It doesn't mean that a 5-minute call will do 5 hours or 10 minutes, 10 hours. A 2-minute call can entrain the brain for 2 hours. And in that time, the child's brain cannot function properly. Depending on where the waves are, what the waves are doing, will depend on the behavior that the child exhibits. It has been known and it has been measured that in severe cases, long-term potentiation can take up to 6 weeks before the body can come back to its normal state. Now you have, as I said earlier, other vibrational frequencies in the body. Lots of organs vibrate. There are lots of different pulse frequencies, modulation frequencies, lots of different waves, piggybacking on waves. They are enormous complex systems now, where you have waves coming into the body. They can affect the normal wave function of the cells. For instance, the tetra frequency of around 16, 17 pulses or modulations a second, we know that that can affect water. We know that it causes calcium efflux in the brain. We know it can affect yeasts. There are other frequencies that will affect the sodium, chlorine, calcium, potassium in the cells that will make them leak, make the cells leak, as well as the calcium. So once you have a vibrational frequency coming in, and we're getting very technical here, if you take an ordinary cell, and I'll stick just to calcium, if you take an ordinary cell, it's bounded by the chemical element calcium, which has, if you like, 2 arms, and they hold on to each other, and they hold the cell structure in place. If the tetra signal goes in, or any signal like the tetra, it vibrates the calcium, and the calcium comes off the cell wall. Once it comes off the cell wall, it's replaced by potassium. Now, the potassium doesn't have 2 arms, it only has 1. And so the cell wall starts to leak. And when you get leakage, there is a chemical process from the lysosomes in the cell and the heat shock proteins. There are messages that go through to the DNA. For the scientists, you have the adenosine triphosphate double bond is compromised with the oxygen and hydrogen and sodium. For nutrients, you then get the reactive oxygen species released, and what happens then is the cell may die, it may turn cancerous, it may recover. It's an immensely complex thing, but it's due to the vibration. And I will agree with all the scientists when they say microwaves are not powerful enough to break the DNA as it is. What they do is they cause a cellular change on the surface that has a chain reaction that goes through, and it's immensely complex, and that damages the DNA, unlike X-rays or gamma rays that go straight through. So every single part of your body has its own cyclotronic or circadian vibrational frequency. And it depends on the size of the organ, the type of wave, the vibrational frequency, the modulation frequency, the pulse frequency. Lots of things come into play. But it is possible for government agencies to target specific organs, specific cells, with the frequency that will destroy them. And I would say I'm incredibly impressed with the knowledge of the gentleman here, and I really am impressed. And if these gentlemen are prepared to join any of you who want to take on a school, I would think the school wouldn't stand a chance. I really don't, with all of the expertise you've got here. And this is why I say I'm an ordinary bloke, an ordinary man. There's nothing special about me. I try to do a job. But if you look at the complexities here, and this is where we are, to be an expert in this field, and it's not a word I use. I do not like the word expert, and I will never call myself an expert. To be an expert, you would have to be an expert in electronics to understand all this, in physics to understand all of the waves, in biochemistry and physiology to know how the waves interact with the body. You would need a really, really good grounding in cellular biology and all of the things that can happen at the quantum level in quantum physics. And if you want to try and put the whole lot together, you need the sort of mathematics that nightmares are made of and probably hasn't been invented. And this is why I welcome. I will make mistakes and I will get things wrong because I'm not an expert. I have a degree in nuclear and atomic physics and a diploma in biology and physiology and another research degree. But I'm not an electrician. And I'm not a biochemist. And as the gentleman said, you know, there are specialist topics within that. And you only study for 4 years at university. So it is a mammoth topic, and this is why we are in the mess we are in. And if these gentlemen, the ones that came up earlier, and the gentlemen that have been correcting me, and thank you very much, I like to be corrected because if I give another talk, I can improve and I can grow up. And if you want to take on a school or you want to fight a battle, call in the people that have argued with me. I'm sure they will win for you because they're good. Okay, sir? Thank you. Thank you.